This is lesson 88, comparing negative numbers, and on a totally unrelated note, square roots. Let's start with comparing negative numbers. It's very helpful to use a number line when we're comparing negative numbers. Now, you can think of the years in history as like a number line. So you've learned about things that happened before Christ, right? We call that BC. So if we were to do a history timeline and the year 0 was the year that Jesus was born, we would be 2020 years after Jesus was born, or AD or CE, okay? Well, before Jesus was born, we'd call that BC. So we have 100 BC and 200 BC. You notice that the higher the number, the farther back we go. Okay, so if we go back to our number line, we can see that -5, we're going to compare -5 and -2. We can see that -5 here is smaller than -2 here. So -2 is the bigger number, so that's where my alligator mouth is going to open up toward. -5 is less than -2. Okay? In our example 2, it asks us to put these 4 numbers in order from least to greatest. Okay, now this is not hard with positive numbers, but you have to remember that the larger the negative number is, the smaller it is. So, putting this in order, we'd have -3 here, then -1 here, then 0 here, then 2 here. Okay, so now we're going to move on to square roots. Like the name implies, we're going to be looking at squares. Okay, so let's assume we have a square. All these sides are the same. I'm going to call them L, okay? So unknown, side L. And we know that the area is 100 square centimeters. So if I take L times L, or L squared, I'm going to find the area. Well, this should be an easy one to do in your head. You know that L should be 10 centimeters, because 10 centimeters times 10 centimeters would give us that area 100 square centimeters. Okay, so this is square root. This is what we do when we're looking at a square root. A perfect square, and by the way, this symbol right here is what we would use for square root. A perfect square is where the square root is a whole number. Now, these numbers should be memorized, just like the prime numbers from 1 to 20. Okay, 1 is not a prime number, but those prime numbers should be memorized, right? The square roots up to, I would say, 144, that should be memorized, okay? So know your perfect squares. Here are some examples of perfect squares. 1 is a perfect square because if we take the square root of 1, it equals 1. 4 is a perfect square. The square root of 4 is 2. 9, the square root of 9 is 3, okay? So some other perfect squares would be 16, 64, 81. Okay, so these, you need to memorize your perfect squares. All right, so let's move on to example 3. Example 3 is square root of 64. Now, you can think about this 2 ways. You can either think of a square that has... So, example 3, square root of 64. We can think about this 2 ways. If we had a square, okay, and the area was 64, what would the sides equal? Okay, that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is, what 2 numbers, okay, multiplied together would equal 64? All right, and the answer is 8. The answer is 8, because 8 squared is 64. And it's that easy. So you should be ready to do those practice problems and turn them into practice.